as a depressed man because they never let me go and help them. And it's ironic because in Cairo, in the 80s, there was, I think it was a terrorist bombing or there was a mass collapse of a building. And they called Abdul Sattar Edhi to come and help. He was the one who helped in Cairo with this whole disaster program. And they were so astounded by his abilities that he said, I got a sense of being able to smell where dead bodies were. So I would stand in one place and tell the crane, pick the boulders up from here. And they would pick it up and they would find a dead body there. I would go another place and I would say, go here. And they would pick it up and they would find bodies there. He goes, they were amazed to see how I was able to do that. And he goes, that's just what years of experience. I realized and I was able to have a sense of what a rotting body smells before even other people can smell it. And they used his aid. He further goes, and I want to, inshallah, I'll elaborate a little more on that, but he goes that my whole life, I buried 200,000 human beings with my own hands. These were human beings. In fact, I will read this right here. He goes, actually, sorry, give me 1 second. I just want to read this quote on how he helped people. And he gives it, this is what he goes. I began at the Mitadar and brought back bloated, drowned bodies from the sea. Black bodies that crumbled with one touch. I picked them up from rivers, from inside wells, from roadsides, accident sites, and hospitals. I picked them up from manholes and gutters, from under bridges and railways, from tracks, watersheds, and drains. When families forsook them and authorities threw these people away, I picked up their dead bodies. Bodies infested with maggots, tightly wound in sacks. I brought them home to my workforce, spreading the stench in the air forever. Then I bathed them and cared for each and every victim of any circumstance, just like I had done for my own mother. I embalmed them with camphor, wrapped them in coffins, and buried them. He goes, an old man was discovered in a dry well on the outskirts of Karachi, and his brothers had asked me to come and help get this body out. The smoldering afternoon heat of Karachi, and I don't know if all of you know, actually majority of you probably do know how Karachi is. Karachi, I mean, it is very humid. It's on the ocean. And I mean, with the humidity and so on, definitely gets above 50, probably close to 55 degrees, I'm sure, with the humidity. But I mean, that's how hot it gets. So it goes that I smelt flesh. The smoldering afternoon heat of Karachi summer had cooked it, spreading the sharp acidic fumes in the air. Experience told me that the body was 9 days old. Villagers and family members were gathered at a distance. Although the family was badly shaken, nobody removed the chadars, held tightly across their noses. So each member of the family had cloths covering their nose, except Edhi. I walked up to the body thinking, does anybody realize that a scene such as this penetrates the grave and unravels a bit of its mystery, meaning that this man's body was wrapped in a cloth? And he said, do they not realize that what we will be opening up to see is actually an experience and a sight of what a body is in the grave? And when, with my hand, I brushed away thousands of crawling maggots and termites from the decomposed body, wrapped it in a white sheet, and then carried it on my shoulder to the graveyard, to the ambulance. I drove with the body to the graveyard while the little crowd followed. He said, I was amazed to see that everyone of this person who was dead, their beloveds, their loved ones, all stood back from the stench. And it was ironic for me to see that love was not able to overcome this. That their own family member who had died, they did not have that love to pick him out of that well. They had to ask someone else to do it. He spent his whole life doing this. His whole life going to sites, picking up dead people, carrying them on his shoulders. He goes to the fact that when I would go to the Mitadar office, that people, my staff, would be grimacing at the sight of it. And they would be going home and washing their hands to get the stench of dead bodies out of them. They said that they would wash their clothes so much so that the stench would not leave their clothes, that they would sell it, that they couldn't stand this stench. And they asked him, so, "Oh Idi," his wife said, "Oh Idi, while all of us are grimacing and all of us cover our faces from the smell, how do you stand it?" He goes, "Oh Bilqis, because I think of it that this dead body could be yours or mine. And because of that love that I have for you, I treat each body the same. And I don't grimace at all." He goes, the greatest disaster of humanity is their actions towards humanity. That there's grimacing, that there's holding back, they're trying to help, but showing this sign of disgust when you see humanity. That when you see a decomposing body, or whatever the case may be, I'm not saying obviously it's a pretty sight, but he's saying that this is what I found, that humanity, when they need each other for help, they're the last people there to be helping. And he's devoted his life for this very manner. And inshallah, before I end on his life and continue on the themes that I want to speak of, he said that his work gained recognition. So much so that he was saying, once I went to a site where police officers and gangsters were in a fight. And I took out my loudspeaker and I said, "This is Idi, and I'm here to pick up the dead bodies." For 20 minutes, all firing ceased. Neither the gangsters nor the police officers shot a bullet until I picked everybody up and I left. He goes, once I was driving down the highway and I saw a gunfight, and I stopped and I said, "Brothers, what are you doing? We can discuss this through dialogue. Put down your guns. What are you doing? You don't have to kill each other." And there was a man on the roof and there was a man on the ground. And the man on the ground said, "Oh Idi, just relax, sit on the ground, you will get killed." And the very same man on the roof said the same thing. He said, "Oh Idi, protect yourself, otherwise you will get killed." And they were trying not to shoot him. He goes, that very same man that threw me to the side so that I wouldn't be hit with a bullet came and hit him right in the heart. And he fell right on top of me dead. He goes, this is the reverence, and he's not saying this, but this is even the reverence that gangsters, drug dealers, mafia people have given this man, because they realize that he's not for anything but humanity. He does not take a salary at all. He was able, and he's a very shrewd businessman, that he took his money and he invested it in government bonds. And he said, that way, that the interest every year that the government bond gives me, I live off of that. So that I am not limited in my work, and that I'm not dependent on anyone, and I'm self-sufficient. And that's how he lives. And if you see his attiring, he has a simple gray shalwar kurta, and he wears sandals. Some people say that he's been wearing the same sandals for 20 years, and it could be true. His whole life is such an austere example of, in fact, it reminds me of Hazrat Abu Dhar al-Ghaffari, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Hazrat Abu Dhar al-Ghaffari was one who would do takfir, or who would say that any Muslim who holds food till the next day, they're not believers. Because they believe they will live till tomorrow, but only God knows if they will live till tomorrow. So much so that Hazrat Uthman went to Hazrat Abu Dhar al-Ghaffari, and Hazrat Abu Dhar al-Ghaffari was a beloved. Muhammad ﷺ loved him. And he said, "Oh Abu Dhar, your continuous declaration of saying people are non-Muslims because they're doing this and that has made it difficult for us to run the city. You will have to leave." And the same manner, his way is the very same manner. That he said, I would cook food, and for 4 days that same roti, that chapati that I made, I would eat. That's all I would eat. That I did not find a need for me to create more food when there was food present. And I loathed that. I hated the fact that people would cook more food than they could consume. And I hated that fact that people would consume more than they needed. And he still lives in that same 2-bedroom household for the past 50 years. And he hasn't left. The same 2-bedroom household for the past 50 years. Even though he has billions of rupees in his account to use, and no one would have an issue with it if he used it on himself. But he didn't. And this is something, brothers and sisters, that as human beings and as Muslims, that we need to realize that these are people that are so few, but whose work inspires the world. And that's all he said. He goes, I don't need anything from anyone. I don't want anything from anyone. I don't need recognition from anyone. I don't need anything from anyone. So long as these people realize the value of a human life, that's all I want. He said when the fight was in Lebanon, again, when the incursion of Israel in Lebanon, he said, I wrote a letter to Tony Blair and George Bush. And I said, oh leaders, there are human beings dying. Why don't you do something? He said 3 days later, the bombing and everything ceased. I remember that when I heard him say that live in an interview, I started laughing. I'm like, does Edhi actually think that his letter causes people to stop?